Hi, my name is Milan Andrejevic, and this is a pre-recorded presentation for the 2021 meeting of the Society for Mathematical Psychology. Today I'm going to tell you about a project in which I leveraged the diffusion decision model in order to disentangle distinct sources of moral decision caution in third-party moral judgment. Evaluations of other people's actions as morally good or bad are very important for humans. They undergird our social relationships and form the basis for our legal, political, and governmental institutions. Yet, moral judgments are not made in isolation, but in a complex informational context, and various types of contextual information can influence our moral judgments, and this includes information regarding social identities of moral actors and victims, their economic status, or their deservingness, given, for example, by their history of moral or immoral actions. As we learn this information, we tend to flexibly update our moral judgments, switching from relying on context-independent to relying on context-dependent norms. Additionally, very often we make our judgments in information dynamic settings, in which some information may be absent at the moment we make judgments, but may become available in the future. In such situations, people may be cautious not to make judgments that need to be revised in the future. Context-independent and context-dependent norms have been characterized particularly well for distributive justice problems. An example of a context-independent norm is equality. For someone to adhere to this norm, it's sufficient to know how many people are participating in the distribution. If one person is given $10 and one partner, she can decide to follow the equality norm and split the money in half. Another example is generosity. A person can decide to give more than a half to her partner. Context-dependent norms, on the other hand, require additional information. Equity norm depends on contextual information regarding need or previous contributions to the resource. Reciprocity norm accounts for information regarding previous interactions of the dyad. An indirect reciprocity norm accounts for deservingness, based on, for example, yellow players' history of sharing behaviors. Previous research has shown that people prefer to split resources according to context-dependent norms whenever contextual information is made salient. And this is true for both first-person sharing decisions and for third-party moral judgments. In information dynamic settings, some people may even withhold their judgments before they learn contextual information, and this suggests that context expectancy can make people be more cautious in their judgments. Although caution seems to play an important role in third-party moral judgments, its computational underpinnings are poorly understood. So we looked into the diffusion decision model literature for some additional insight into this issue. The diffusion decision model has mostly been used to explain response time and response data of perceptual decisions. It describes the decision process as a continuous accumulation of noisy evidence signal over time until a boundary is reached, and in its simplest form it's defined by three parameters, which can be set to vary across conditions. The boundary separation parameter, or A, the position of the starting point in relation to two boundaries, or Z, and the slope of the accumulation signal, or V. The model finds strong support in animal studies where neural firing rate was found to closely track the hypothesized accumulation process. Important for us is that DDM can also be regarded as a universal decision process model. It has been shown to provide a good fit for value-based decisions, sharing and cooperation choices, as well as moral decisions. But it has never been applied before to study third-party moral judgment, nor to understand how the information dynamic settings impact the underlying decision processes. So let's have a closer look into how different forms of caution and response time slowing effects can be conceptualized within the DDM. The first form of caution is the tendency to slow a decision in order to increase accuracy across choice options. This form of caution has been shown to occur when participants are explicitly instructed to increase accuracy, when they expect the task to be difficult, when they expect to learn more information about the choice set. Within the DDM framework, this general tendency corresponds to parameter A. If context expectancy causes caution, we expect the boundary separation to increase in the context expectant condition, extending the duration of the judgment process. Another type of caution is a tendency for people to slow their judgments in a biased manner for one particular choice option. Typically, people slow their judgments in a biased way for options that are negatively reinforced, and since falsely judging someone as morally bad can be very costly for our social relationships, over and above judging someone as good, people may slow their judgments when judging someone as bad. This biased effect of caution is captured by the shift of the bias or z parameter towards the good judgment option, making the speed of good judgments faster and bad judgments slower. Apart from these caution-related effects, there are also slowing effects relevant for moral judgments that cannot be attributed to caution, because there's no decision or judgment to be cautious about. For instance, people think longer about negative events, look longer at negative images, and are longer distracted by negative words. Based on these effects, we can theorize that, unrelated to caution, negatively valenced evidence may be accumulated at a slower rate, as captured by the drift rate parameter, or V. The drift rate parameter typically takes both negative and positive values, but the absolute magnitude represents the slope of the noisy signal. This parameter has been shown to scale with stimulus discriminability in visual choice tasks, and we expect, for this reason, this parameter to also scale with the prototypicality of the action as morally good, representing adherence to a moral norm, or bad, representing a deviation from a moral norm. We devised a third-party moral judgment task in which participants made fairness-related judgments across a range of sharing actions of others, while either expecting or not expecting to learn contextual information. To do this, we presented our participants with a cover story in which they learned about a previous study where we invited people to share some money with their partners. We focused on round 2 of the study, in which person C was paired up with either person A, who participated in round 1 of the study, or person D, who was a new person. Person C was assigned the role of the decision maker in the game and given $10 to share with their partner. Importantly, if their partner was person A, person C could see how much person A had given in the previous round of the game to another person before they made their decision to share, effectively learning something about the deservingness of person A. If they were paired with person D, there was no contextual information available to person C. Our participants went on to do a task in which, in every trial, they were first informed whether the receiver was an old player or a new player, and went on to make their moral judgments of the decision maker's offer, which ranged from $0 to $10, by selecting one of the judgment options as quickly as possible. Participants made these judgments either knowing that they will later learn information about receiver's deservingness, and have a chance to revise their judgments, or not learn anything new at all. To summarize, based on previous research, we can expect people to slow their moral judgments when they're expecting additional contextual information and when judging negatively valenced actions for caution-related reasons. We can also expect some non-caution-related slowing effects of negative valence. Each of these response time effects should be captured by changes in distinct components of the decision process. We ran 2 experiments in order to test these predictions. In the first experiment, context expectancy was manipulated across trials, whereas in experiment 2 it was manipulated across blocks. Both of these studies were pre-registered, And in this graph, you can see that there were no differences in moral judgment outcomes across expectancy conditions. When it comes to response time, however, you can see that there were small but consistent differences across expectancy conditions, with context expectant condition always a bit slower, and this difference was consistent across quantiles and statistically significant. Moreover, there was also a slight slope where participants took longer to judge lower offers, and this was also found to be significant. These effects provided evidence for each of our response time hypotheses, and they replicated in experiment 2 were actually much stronger in a block design. As for our DDM results, we showed that the hypothesized model with parameters fitted for separate experimental conditions showed a substantially better fit than the null model, which is indicated by the lower DSC value. Our hypothesis that the decision boundary parameter would be larger in context expectant condition was at least descriptively supported in experiment 1, but Bayesian evidence was weak. The effect came out strong in the block design, which supported our hypothesis that expecting contextual information should influence decision caution and widen decision boundaries. Our hypothesis that the bias parameter would shift towards the good option, indicating caution against selecting bad response, was also supported and replicated in experiment 2. And finally, we also found support for the hypothesis that negatively valenced actions would have a slower accumulation rate, because absolute drift rates for lower offers were found to be smaller than absolute drift rates for larger offers. We reran this test on a narrower range of offers, and this effect persisted. The effect also replicated in study 2. Stunningly, across both studies, the drift rate maintained a monotonic relationship with the decision maker's offer, which is in line with our prediction that the drift rate would correspond to moral prototypicality of the stimulus in our task. And finally, posterior predictive simulations based on the fitted models managed to capture important features of our data, indicating that DDM can explain our data quite well overall. So to recap our findings, we found that expecting new contextual information slowed down response times, and that this effect was captured well by increases in decision boundary separation. These results are in line with our theory that people would be more cautious when expecting to learn additional contextual information, and demonstrate that contextual information impacts decision processes even if it's not yet been shown, but is merely expected. We also showed that negative valence of the stimulus slowed down response times, and that this was captured by two distinct processes. First, shifts of the starting point bias away from the negative judgment option, which suggests that people were more cautious to judge negatively valenced actions. To note, this effect was present even though there was no actual reinforcement in this task and no repercussions to making any judgments in this study. Second, lower drift rates for negatively valenced stimuli, suggesting that people accumulated negatively valenced evidence at a slower rate. Overall, we demonstrate that the DDM framework can be used to advance our theoretical understanding of decision processes underlying moral decision caution in moral judgments, but many important questions remain unanswered. For example, are these effects of caution specific to third-party moral judgments, or do they generalize to other decisions in information dynamic settings? Further research is also required to more closely investigate how social repercussions influence decision processes. For the end, I would just like to thank my supervisory team for their fantastic support and lab members that got involved and helped immensely with this project. And lastly, I would like to thank you for your attention and welcome you to ask any questions.